Welcome to part two of my discussion with Tom Boyd. If you haven't seen part one, then go back and have a look at that one because then it'll really make sense. Enjoy part two. So you've written a book called Nowhere to Hide, and in there you talk about anxiety, insomnia, anxiety, and depression. That's almost the triple whammy of mental health.
It's like the Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
But they all kind of go together, to
It's
be
like
honest.
the Holy Trinity. Like you got the whole lot.
The opposite.
The trifecta. No.
No, but they all go together. I mean, I think I've explained this publicly many times, but if you can't sleep, what happens is obviously your mood gets affected. And one of the ways that your body copes with being extremely tired and overworked and stressed and all that sort of stuff is it generates a whole heap of cortisol to make you feel anxious and alert so that you can do the things that you need to do. And then after that crash happens, then you feel terrible. And it's just this vicious cycle. And obviously, as I've already mentioned, all these outside perspectives that get thrown in on top is just gasoline to the fire. And look, there was really dark periods, in particular around sleep, where, I just couldn't do it at all. And you hop into bed and you already know that you're not going to get any sleep for the next day. And it's a real debilitating part, I think, of my story. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so comfortable sharing it is I think it's a critically easy to understand thing for people who don't maybe think about mental health that much. We've all had bad night's sleep, and the flow on from that is quite significant, even in one example, right? I've got a almost 4-week-old at home. Sleep is different than it was 4 weeks ago, even though I've got another daughter, which we've been through as well. So, being able to manage those things and to try and turn things around quickly was a real poor thing for me to do. I was terrible at it. And what I've found, and I think, a lot of people go, oh, what's the silver bullet and the solution that you come to now that you're doing public speaking and you've been out on the MCG in front of 65,000 people doing Spud's Game and telling us about, how to look after each other. Geez, you're doing great. And I am. I'm doing fantastically well at home and life is good. The short answer is, which no one wants to hear, is when I was struggling, my downward spiral was the easiest thing in the world to do. Right? I was certain a bad morning would be a bad day would be a bad week, and so on and so forth. And I was also sure that the next day would be worse than the one before. And that wasn't true, but it was felt true. Whereas these days, again, you talk about the self-talk and the things that you're trying to manage, getting on top of things and moving them quickly and dealing with problems and getting them off your desk as quickly as possible and not letting them paralyze you and stress you out and all that stuff. And just trying to keep life moving and keep the wheels turning, I think, is one of the biggest sort of things that I do quite well these days to make sure that I don't end up, in a position like I have been before.
I've found that whilst it was years ago, I've still had to manage a lot of things. And there have been times where I do let those thoughts, I take them down, and then I get to the point where, hey, okay, Ziggy, come on, like get out and do something, and whatever it is. Do you still find you've got to manage it?
I don't think about it that way. I know a lot of guys who do. So this is just, I think, a difference of perspective more than anything. I try to not think about it like that, and I know this is not what you said to me, but I do think that there's an interesting conversation happening around this space in the world at the moment where we very much pathologize a lot of this stuff, where we say, hey, you're anxious, therefore you have an anxiety issue, which may be true. I'm not a doctor, right? But I do think about my major falling down part was, hey, I'm miserable, or whatever I was thinking. It's like that was who I was at that time.
It was your identity
you make
at the
it
time.
Who you are, and I don't think that's a positive thing, and I think that's a real slippery slope to be on. And so how do we move to whether we feel that we've gotten over our issues of the past or whether we're managing them day to day, and which we all are managing them in some way, shape or form, how do we move from this is something that I've dealt with, not something who I am at the moment? I think that's a critical thing, especially for young people, right? Moving on in life and not by the way, not burying all of your issues and not dealing with them, but moving through them and moving past them is something that I don't feel is well sort of versed in today's conversation. And I think a lot of young people have become through, well-intended support and well-intended messaging, and some of which I've done myself, by the way, they have very much made this stuff part of who they are. Yeah, and I think that's a mistake. Yeah.
There's a real identity crisis in so many areas. I see it in, financial services, if you like, where people say, oh, we're never going to get ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, we're never going to get ahead. We've always had bad luck. Yeah, something that's happened to me. It
That's
always happens
accountants
to me.
talking.
and so there's some stuff that needs to change up here. And we're not talking about just rah positive, because we know that only lasts for a certain period of time.
I'm a sucker for punishment. Is a real And like other parts of the world, we call it victimhood and all this stuff. And I think it's completely all supercharged because it's all part of a bigger conversation. But my positive spin on it is, I am a person who has been incredibly lucky in life, and I mean that genuinely. This is not me dismissing the things that I've done or the efforts that I've made and the success that I've had based on a whole range of hard work and sacrifice, but I've still been very lucky. And even with that luck, I still ended up in a very, very bad spot that so many people end up in. And I was lucky again in that time to have support around me that I could actually turn to when I finally decided to actually fix this stuff. Most people don't have that. So if that all is true, then people who have much worse life than me should definitely feel comfortable getting support before it's too late and just dealing with this stuff so that they can move on and just start to live a great life after, which is what I've experienced in my story.
So where did that support come from for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. Most of it I pushed away for about 5 years. And then...
as guys, we do.
Yeah. Guys, footballers. I mean, I had such a defensive stance against the world, to be honest, at that time. And I think... I'm not perfect now by any stretch, but I feel like some of the good defensiveness, because I didn't have any when I entered the league, I was very trusting. Some of the good defensiveness I've been left with, which has served me quite well, but that's another story. So I think primarily, I was with my wife she was my partner at the time. She was incredible, Anna, and she's always been a great support of mine. I think mum and dad tried their best and very differently. Like my mum was like, asked me how I was 57 times a day, which made it worse. And I had to set some boundaries with her.
Yeah.
And my dad said something, I think, which is quite sign of the times, and probably maybe for blokes listening to this is a really critical, at least first step. So I remember when I took time off with my mental health in 2017, and I spoke to Dad on the phone, and he goes, mate, I don't get any of this stuff, right? Never learnt about it, right? Typical old Australian. And people go, oh, this guy. But then the next thing he said was the most important. He said, but I'm here to support you with whatever you need. Right? I don't care what it is. I'm here for you. And for me, that's all I needed. And I often tell this story because I think, again, it's very symptomatic of the times that we're in. That conversation with Dad is, almost 10 years ago. And a lot of that conversation has drastically changed with him as to where he'll go back through the catalogue that is his memory of his life and go, actually, we lost that bloke. He disappeared. He had an issue with relationships. He had an issue with his mood. He went off the rails. We just called it all these different things, right? We didn't have an umbrella term for, hey, this guy's struggling mentally.
Right.
Either by his own doing or by, he's a victim of whatever's going on mentally for him. And nowadays he goes, it's everywhere. It's all of my... So now what we do, and again, I've told this story publicly before, is... we go down to the footy club on a Thursday night, of which has changed a little bit in the last 12 months. But, we go down and there's 10 of us that are there or 15 of us or whatever. If any one of those guys aren't there for whatever reason, we don't know what it is, we call them the next day straight away, all of us. As many of us as who can. Where are you? You all right? All good. Yeah. Because it's happened a few times with them that guys drop off. And it might be 3 months before they come back, 6 months because they've had a health issue or whatever it is. And they're like, we don't want that to happen. We want them to continue to be a part of this community because it's critical for us as we get older. We don't have our workplaces. We need somewhere that we can all congregate.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. That's all, because that doesn't happen enough.
No.
I think as guys, we don't talk about things enough, and we don't. Hey, are you okay? Like, when you see let's call it a red flag, when you see something's a bit off. Sometimes we're so busy, just let it go.
I think my advice, though, in that space is stop placing so much emphasis on one question, because this is like us. We go, how you doing? And then we go, pretty good, mate. And, I think for me is there's 3 or 4 main areas of your life that typically cause you stress. It's your health, it's your finances, it's your work, and it's your relationships. That's pretty much it, right? Sure, there's all this other stuff as well, but realistically, if you've got good friends, make sure you just keep up to date on how all that stuff's going. And I'm not asking you to go and ask them how they're doing on their, tax returns at the end of the year, or whether they're making more money or less. If you have that relationship, which I do with a few guys, great. But just keeping on top of those things. Most of the issues will come from there. And as guys, we're very practical, and they're more likely to practically talk about those areas than to say, how am I feeling about those areas first? You just deal into the detail, and I think ask a bit more and you'll find out more.
When we're young, we think that money fixes a lot of things, most things, right? You've probably heard the saying, I'd rather cry in a Mercedes than in a Holden.
That's true.
It's true.
Still true.
It is still true.
I don't like Mercedes that much, to be honest. But, in a Toyota.
Toyota. But I imagine when you were in the thick of it, that $1 million, it was $1 million a year, right?
Yep.
That $1 million a year, whether it was $1 million, whether it was 10 million, whether it was just like you're going through shit in life.
Yeah.
And that money wasn't helping much.
Yeah, and I say with a grain of salt, right? Because again, financial hardship is one of the core drivers of mental health problems in Australia, and it should not be overlooked. And I think this is why, not to get broadly political, but if you look at some of the challenges that we're facing from a cost of living point of view, et cetera, I mean, the Australian housing market, in particular for young blokes and for young people and young couples, is a really challenging space to be. And it gave people a lot of purpose for a long time, right? At least a building towards owning my own home. And I think in many ways, it's not just the financial element, but it's the outcome that you get from that. That this is mine and this is where we're going to raise our kids and all that stuff. That if that does start to be sort of drained away in terms of accessibility, you get a whole range of symptomatic issues that come from the back of that. And that's sort of the lens that I look through, rather than just I'm not an economist, but I do certainly see the elements that come from it. And I think for me, there was times when I was playing footy that I was actually tried to use that excuse of, but I'm making good money, so get stuffed. Not with people, but mentally. Like it didn't help at all. Yeah. It never made me sleep any better at night or never helped me deal with any of the stress better. But having said that, there is absolutely a correlation between being able to afford the things that I afford now based on my footy career and the earnings that I had that make my life easier now than it is for a lot of people. And I'm absolutely upfront and honest about that. One, because everyone knows how much I got paid, right? Yeah. It's all publicised. But two, I'm not dismissive that money is important. And I think people who say money doesn't make you happy, that's true, but it's a lot easier.
Yeah, yep.
Life can be a lot easier if
so,
you have money.
Okay, so we're at 2016, right?
Yep.
Let me fast forward to the premiership. You're in the middle of all of this going on?
Yes. Well, I mean, so it's never a linear sign, right? Like, it's like people always go, so it was good here and bad there. It's never like that, right? There's always good and bad moments. But vastly speaking, I think the way I think about it was that if you were going to draw a what is it called? A gradient,
yes,
if you will. I was just thinking back to year 11 algebra. It would be a very negatively declining one. Right. I've got a downward slope across the board.
Did you sleep the Friday night?
Yeah, well, this is what I was about to say, and definitely. So, I mean, I've heard a lot of blokes, actually, interestingly enough, since I've moved into the mental health space over the last 6 or 7 years, and they talk about how in these big moments they were really struggling. It was in the back of their mind. That wasn't the case for me, in all honesty. I'd had some really, really rough periods in 2016, and often for 6, 8 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks at a time, big chunks. But I'd also had a few bright sparks as well. And one of those bright sparks was the month sort of leading into the finals, and in particular, obviously, that grand final period as well. And so I was probably as good as I'd been for quite some time around that period. And I don't know, chicken or the egg. But I was as happy as you can imagine standing on the stage of the MCG and playing a part in, not only a great game and a memorable moment. And I'm very happy to receive all the flowers for that, as some people may have realised. But at the same time, it's not lost on me the fact that the actual impact of that game goes far beyond me and my teammates, right? This is a very poor club historically, both on the field and, from an ability to stay alive. Mergers are a big part of the question mark, the survival, the fight back in 89, the pain and suffering, the fights at Whitnove, all of that mud and gore and guts, right? That's all part of our history. And to be a part of the first team in 62 years to win a flag, and frankly to be now, unfortunately we had Doug Reynolds die throughout the week, who was one of the 1954 premiership players. We're probably only down to we're only down to 2 or 3 players, other than the 2016 guys. Like, this is a very, very limited club of 25 or 26 people who've been premiership players that are still alive for our footy club in the Western Bulldogs, and forever grateful to be one of those guys.
So did you get, you've won the premiership? Was there a feeling of, I'm proud of myself because of what I've gone through and having achieved this win now?
No, not what I've gone through, but very much what are they going to say about me now?
Right.
21-year-old millionaire premiership player, made Brian Taylor swear on radio.
Yeah.
Get stuffed. What are you going to say now? Didn't stop him. Didn't stop them. And then actually, in many ways, the expectation rose the next year, and for all of us. And then look, there was a number of challenges that we had. And this is the thing: life is so complicated because there is a combination of the real and imagined, right? Very real challenge was that we had 29 surgeries at the end of 2016. Imagine challenge that we had to back it up and win another flag.
Yeah.
Right? That's all perspective and perception, and you know whether it's real or not is an argument.
Yep.
But when you combine all of these things together, life gets hard quick, and this is why life's complicated. I think is, it's not only the real things that do happen to us, but the things that we think are happening, which might not be true at all.
So you. With that first year or two, you bought your place in Albert Park.
Yep.
You had a few more years of some good income. What did you do with that?
Well, I basically tried to pay that house off.
Okay.
Then I did a renovation, and that was about it. I did a bit of travel, but all within reason, especially for the time. And then, that was about it. As I said, I've had a few Toyotas. I've got some investment stuff as well. But
awesome.
Really just tried to basically go, cornerstone, and it depends on your philosophy, right? Everyone, most of us have got some super. But in my head as a 21 or 22-year-old, I'm like, that's 50 years away. And I think it's important. I think people should invest in their super. Don't get me wrong. The supermarket would say that you should. And the fact that there's whatever $1 trillion in there. But at the same time, that's not accessible money for a large period.
Yeah.
And it should be treated, in my opinion, as that way. And we've all heard the horror stories of people being tricked into getting that money out. And it's a nightmare.
Absolutely.
Right? So that was one cornerstone. Your house is obviously another significant part in terms of Australia. That's a big part of our culture. And it's certainly been, as per all of the political discussions at the moment, the market has been rampant for a long time. Right. Yeah. And in particular, in the last few years, it's starting to get to quite... Brisbane being more expensive than Melbourne honestly insults me.
Unbelievable.
It insults me.
Unbelievable.
But
I can understand. You were saying before about the young people, and I can understand because this is what I hear a lot about the hopelessness of being able to afford a property.
Yeah.
Your own home, like somewhere where you can call.
I rented, right? I've done renting, and I did it for 4 or 5 years. Oh, and I hated it. I had the feeling that you get. And this is coming from a genuine point of empathy. The feeling that you get that the rug can get pulled out from underneath you is a horrendous one. And then if you couple on top of that the stories from WA and those types of things in particular, where you've got 50 couples turning up to rental properties and those types of things, you go, Sydney's the same. You're like, that sounds horrible, like really horrible. Yeah. And I don't think that's good for what we built as a society here in Australia. But I'm also not an economist and knows how to fix it. So in my mind, definitely cornerstone was a house, and I'm very lucky to have been able to do that. And then I think I have some managed stuff in the share market and so on and so forth. But really, just trying to spread yourself out in a relatively simple and conservative way that you understand. And I think understanding is a critical part of it. If you don't know, you're leaving yourself up to a lot of unforeseen risk, I think.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is important in terms of a principle, right? Because I've told my kids, I've told a lot of the younger people, is that the earlier you start, the less you have to do.
That's right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and this is like, to your point, this is one of those things, little drips and drabs.
Yeah.
Everyone's heard the compound interest stories and all that stuff, which is all great. But in reality, what it is it's actually setting the direction of your life. I think that's more important. And the direction of the structure that you're actually going for as early as possible. Because it's all well and good going, okay, well, I'm going to change super funds. That's pretty easy, right? Yeah. But in terms of, I'm actually going to put some and contribute into that super fund. I'm going to contribute into X, Y, and Z. Those are big decisions to make that first step.
So did you go to any, did the football clubs or the football environment or anyone, did you go to any talks about money? Well, did you, apart from talking about your dad, was there anyone else that spoke to you? Because I argue that there's not enough spoken about management of money at school.
Yep.
And certainly afterwards.
Yeah, I would say definitely. So, Shadforth used to be a partner through AMP, I think, and whatever. So we definitely had some stuff. I think my issue with so I don't think it's that complicated to teach super and a few other things. I think that's actually quite simple, and it's more in conversation now than it ever has been, particularly with the social media side of things. I actually think it's all the menial stuff that causes all the problems. So it's your insurance, it's your mortgage itself, it's how to get the right rates on a finance if you are going to finance your cars and all that stuff. I feel like that's where everyone falls down because that's more complicated.
Yep.
And if you were going to say to people, I saw a stupid video online, this lady had just bought a new Chevy, right? and she was going to pay it off over 24 years or something.
Right.
And this $50,000 car was going to cost 250 grand. And I'm like, did anyone sit this person down and go, this is insane?
Yes.
Right? This is absolutely insane. Obviously an extreme example. But if you go and process the world by repayments, right, it doesn't seem that bad. Right? I'm only paying $250 a month or a week or whatever. And I think, again, all of that stuff really, I think, is where people get stuck in the mud, when they just gear themselves up with these, insane repayment models and subscriptions to whatever.
Subscriptions. Chris Cole had told you about that.
Yeah, I was talking about that before. And all of a sudden they go, I've got no money left. Why have I got no money? And now, in particular with those sort of more loan-based things, you can't get out of them. And you're like, mate, this is really dark place to be.
The short-term pay things. So tell me about what ended up, because you'd gone through anxiety, insomnia, depression for a while. Why did you get to the point, and what was the point where you just said, I'm walking away?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think probably the most mischaracterized part of my career is this part. I took some time off in 2017, really was in a bad way before that. And I emphasize the really, because it's important to understand this was a very bleak period of time in my life. But actually returned back to play some VFL footy at the end of 2017 and played quite a bit of AFL footy in 2018. And really, by the end of that year, I had been on the sidelines for 6 or 7 weeks, I would say, with a bad back injury that really didn't improve much over the off-season. I was really struggling with it. And as it so happens, I ended up getting surgery on it a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years after I was retired, where basically my whole disc blew up and it was a nightmare. And so at that time, I was really in this position where I was going, do I want to do this? Do I actually want to play this game? And I've been, afforded all of these opportunities to actually have the ability to choose, which most people don't, just to be clear. Now that I have the choice, what choice do I want to make? And I thought back to, some of the challenging times that I've had, but also what I was excited about post-footy. And I was excited about this mental health work. I was excited about getting into business and to life. And I was almost finished with my business degree. I had a great partner who's, became my fiance not too long after that, and later wife and mother of my 2 children. And I think I was like, I've got enough bones here to go and start this next chapter. And I think one of the unspoken things about AFL players is that, the retirement age is roughly around the same time. 22, 21, typically when people get delisted out of the game. And then, of course, we all know the stories of the guys who last a lot longer. And in many ways, if you get to 25 or 26 and you're retiring from the AFL through your own means or otherwise, you're basically in a position where everyone that you've ever known in your life is so far ahead of you in every way except for probably finances at that moment that you have to do all this catching up. And the example I would use is that if you're 26 and you're working in professional services, you're probably on your first or second promotion. If you're an apprentice, you're now probably 4 or 5 years in, you might be working on the tunnels. You're making a couple $100,000 a year. Like, I'm not saying everyone follows this path, but there's you're essentially
career progression.
If you're progressing, and not only that, but that career can go till you're 70, right? These guys have stopped their career and they're left with basically being infants in many ways. This is what I would call us, and that is the fact that we don't know how to run don't know how to do emails, don't know how to run Google Suite, don't know how to talk to people. Obviously, this varies person to person. But in a lot of cases, these are just big children. That's a really scary place to be. And so I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to delay if I wasn't in the game. And I also didn't want to be the guy who just took all the money and didn't play the footy. And so for me, it was the right decision to retire. I gave back a couple $1 million worth of salary and basically said, I'm just going to cut the cord. Everyone's going to be happy and let's get on with life. And that's what I've done.
So was everyone happy?
Mostly. I mean, there's never everyone's. You can't make everyone happy. But I think that I don't know anyone who ever gave the money back. I don't know anyone in anything, to be honest. And so I think there's an inherent respect that comes from that, I put the line in the sand. I did the right thing. I could have sat there, as we found out, and just done nothing for 2 years and made all this money and genuinely not turn up to training. There's no recourse. But that's not what I wanted to do. So
that's integrity, Tom.
Well, it felt like the right thing, yeah. It makes my life at the club much easier too. Not that that's like the be-all and end-all, but I'm certainly welcome, which I think is great.
Do you get a lot of people reaching out because of what you've done and because of it being public and asking for guidance in different situations?
Not as much as people would think. I I think in the relationships that I have, and they've obviously grown a lot since I finished in footy, that's a big theme. And it's always, it always starts with it's someone else. I'm dealing with someone else's issues. It's never their own. So I've been through some really interesting ones. And I suppose I'm well-versed in, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not any of those things. But if I look at someone's life, particularly someone who was like me, high performer, busy, doing lots of things, it's pretty easy for me to look at them and go, mate, there's a reason you're stressed. You're doing too much shit.
Yeah.
You got too much on.
Yeah.
You're not either giving responsibility to others or you're just physically doing too many things.
Yep.
And you just can't expect yourself to not feel this way, even if you are the most capable people that I know. And that's happened a lot of times.
Yeah.
So there's certainly some conversation I have, and I try and help people I don't do advice so much as in I try and be more practical and helpful. But yeah, it's an interesting part of what I do.
I found that the more you ask questions, because of my profession, you have a lot of people that obviously ask you about finances. And as an accountant, and now more so as a financial planner, because you know so much about their lives, they ask you about a lot more things than just the finances.
Yep.
But I find that if you just ask questions, people end up sort of guiding themselves. You don't need to.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you'll have the boldness, if you like, and comfort and be able to say, hey, mate, that's why, and that's certainly appropriate. But a lot of other times it's just like, what about this? What about that? What have you thought? And people go,
Yeah.
okay, I've got,
This is why psychologists are so frustrating, right? Is that, as someone who spent a lot of time with them, they don't tell you what to do. They guide you to your own assumptions as part of like their ethics.
Yes.
And I think it's a valuable way to do it. I do think there is time for hard and fast advice, definitely. And I think specifically in things like finance, for sure. And just sometimes we all need to be hit between the eyes and be like, this is stupid, stop.
Yep.
Or start. But yeah, I also think that there is a huge market of people who talk rubbish on the internet and in every other form of media who don't really know what they're talking about and give simple solutions to complicated problems, which gets people in very difficult situations, I would say.
Yeah. See it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So you sounds like you didn't have any problem with your identity post football, right? You were.
Oh, I had my moments for sure. I
Okay.
mean, I walked out of the game in 2019 and walked straight into a COVID pandemic. So that wasn't easy. But I think by and large, I knew what I wanted to do. The North Star was there, and I was willing to experiment and see what I needed to do to get to where I wanted to be. And it's been a fantastic journey, as difficult as it was at times. And, I think I've learned a lot about myself, and I think I put myself in a position where I can look back and go, Tom was stupid 2 years ago, he was stupid 4 years ago, which I think is, evident of obviously the growth that you're on. And I think that's accurate in my case.
So what did you do when you left football?
I put my feet up at home and had a beer and watched the Bulldogs get beaten by Fremantle and had the best time watching it for a week. And then I felt real guilty about it. And then I was like, geez, I better get my life sorted. So I got offered to start doing a lot of speaking work. Again, it wasn't something I advertised for or whatever. It was just people asked. And I prepared to go into quite a busy 2020 with regard to that stuff. Big corporate events all over the country. And then after the first event that I did, the whole thing got shut down for 2 years, basically. And in that moment, I lost all my revenue for the year and I didn't have a job. So that was interesting. And again, was in a blessed position, so I still had food to eat.
Yep.
But also, we had to change rentals. It was a whole range of stuff. We were going to do a renovation. It really changed the course of my life quite drastically, 2020. And as one of the really good things that came out of it, I decided to write a book. And so I wrote my memoir, Nowhere to Hide, throughout 2020 and 2021. I started to volunteer. And I realised, I think, probably the crux of my learning at that time was I'd always been around teams and I wasn't at that time. And I was like, this is very strange. I'm used to having someone have my back or me have someone else's. And at that time, I decided to go back and play some footy. So I was at St. Kevin's in the amateurs for a couple of years before, again, all this stuff ramped up. I got married, had a kid, started doing more work for a business called Everperform, which I'm still with today. And we're sort of really heavily focused now on the psychosocial risk space, which where all this mental health conversation now has been regulated into the companies, which is a real, interesting environment to work in. And then I spread my time between sort of ambassadorships and speaking as well. So big ambassadorships with WorkSafe and Lifeline and Movember over the last few years, RecLink Australia, the Bulldogs Foundation. And it's been awesome. It's been unbelievable to meet so many amazing people and to tell my story and to hear theirs and to start to try and work out how we can move the dial on this major issue in our country.
So you've what are some of the lessons post-football, if you like, financially? Because things have changed. You're now earning an income from, speaking, what you're doing with Ever for More, is it?
Ever Perform.
Ever Perform. What are some of your investment philosophies now?
I don't think they've changed drastically. I basically set myself up through footy to go on a path, and I, by and large, stuck to that path without any real major changes. I think the major shift from an economic point of view that's happened in the last few years has been the interest rate hikes. That's a different landscape than I was in. I mean, my whole experience in life as a financially independent person has been with interest rates that are, by and large zero.
Yes.
And I do think that really changes the situation for people. And I think, one of the things that, you trade off obviously with any investment versus debt is you go, well, how good is this investment going to be? Is it actually going to create the offset that you need to offset any of the leverage you have against it? And I think that's an interesting conversation. And I also think that, patience has been a critical part of the last 5 years. If you look at the financial markets, again, I'm no expert, but we saw enormous drops in days at the start of 2020, enormous hikes throughout 2021, and everything in between. And I think that obviously the message I would imagine to people that you work with is if you're trying to make a quick buck, this stuff doesn't work. Yeah. You've got too much liability associated to market shifts. So
we've all tried it.
Take your time. We've
all tried making a quick buck, and there's only a very small percentage where it's actually work. The rest of it is just tried and true. Yeah. It's the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah, it's a tortoise and the hare. It's also how many people have got risk in the game, which diffuses yours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, if enough people are all doing it, that's what the housing market is. That's what the share market is. There's so much incentive about it improving that hopefully it offsets a lot of the risk associated with it over a long time.
You would have been a target for a lot of schemes.
Yeah, a few.
Yeah?
Yeah. I was never really sort of been on any of them. There was there's always the referral codes and all that crap. But I never got roped into, hey, come into this business with me. I was like, man, I didn't roll in those circles. And as I said, I was quite defensive through a lot of my career. And I think that certainly came through that most people didn't approach me to try and get a hold of my money. So, I've seen it happen to guys before, and it is sad. I mean, I think one of the big things in footy is gambling. And so basically the greyhound and horse market is rife with that stuff. And
why do you think that's so?
It's definitely a cultural thing. It's been happening for a long time, and I never got it really. My dad's not into horses, and I'm not into horses. But I think there's a huge amount of fun associated with it with guys. Or what injury have they got? What pet bill and all this other crap in the lead up? Who's training? What are the training notes? We can talk about it. That horse, this horse, and I think that side of it's actually really interesting. That's like fantasy football, right? Is the equivalent. But on the other side of the coin, it's the only sport that I know that people are embedded in, that they have a fun game that also requires huge amounts of capital to be spent in incredibly risky environments with no regulation in most cases. There's a lot of syndicates running around.
Now, you would have thought early on that that the world is your oyster when you saw your photo on a Gatorade bottle.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Till everyone abused me about it, but that happens, Yeah, it was a few things that happened in my career that were all a bit pinch yourself moments. But, at the end of the day, I think, the one that persists now is the goal and the granny. And, no one can take that away from me. So that's nice.
Yeah. Well, what's the one thing that you're walking away from footy going on? If you're looking back now at your whole career and your life, what's the one piece of advice you would give a footballer who's, say, 16, 17.
Yeah, you're not that special would be my advice. And the reason I say that is not because everyone's special, everyone's an individual. We can all, preach that till the cows come home. And in reality, we would be well served being able to learn from those around us in all different facets, and particularly people with expertise in certain areas, of which much we've discussed today. You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be so special, and you're not so individual that no one knows the path that you're on or what you're going through. In reality, many people have seen the path that you're on, and there's a lot of collective wisdom out there that you can access that will actually help you.
Yeah. The one thing I love about talking to people, Tom, and I think you'll find this as well, is everyone has a story.
Oh, for sure.
Everyone has a story, and everyone's messed up at some point, obviously at different levels.
Yeah, for sure.
And in those times of messing up, that's where the largest learnings do occur, and that's when you mature the quickest. That's you mature the most. So I really appreciate you, coming on for a chat.
Thank you.
Talking about footy, we've enjoyed that. We've watched you, from afar. I'm a Carlton supporter.
Yeah, I was too.
My cousins who are mad doggies cannot understand how growing up in Sunshine why I wasn't a doggies supporter.
You're an anomaly in that regard.
But I followed my brother because we barracked for the doggies until he watched the 71 grand final. And the Carlton
I can't
won.
recall that one. It was 24
No, I can't
years
recall it. That was
before
the year I was born. But yeah, we won the grand final and decided to switch,
There you go.
and that was it.
There you go.
Carlton supporters. But thanks for coming on. I wish you all the best. You mentioned before, just to finish on this note, because I've had the similar experience. You mentioned Anna, your partner in terms of your wife, who is has helped you through that process. That's one thing that I've found. I mean, there were the nights that I would just cry in Katina's arms, and she would just rock me to sleep like a little baby.
Yeah. We our relationships are critical.
Yeah, and so it goes so deep.
Yeah.
When that happens.
Yeah, I think it certainly strengthens what you're capable of tolerating together as life goes on. So,
and you realise how much more love
Yeah.
there is, how deeper that love goes.
No doubt.
So well done. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for coming on. All the best for the future.
Thanks for having me.
You continue to prosper, my brother.
Cheers.
Cheers.